All right, you're on.
Cool. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for attending the first charter revision hearing. This is an opportunity for the community to tell the commission what they'd like us to consider and look at in the town charter to see if things need to be revised. But the most important thing is that we want to hear from you tonight. That's what this evening is all about. I'm going to ask everyone to please silence their cell phones and rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ugh. I'm going to ask that each person that would like to speak step up to the podium, state their name and address for the record, and share your thoughts with us. Anybody that wants to get up and go right ahead.
My name is Andrew Kame. I live at 5 Fernbrook Drive. In full disclosure, I'm a member of the Zoning Commission, so my first recommendation here is toward efficiency in that area. I think that the commission should consider merging the Planning Commission with the Zoning Commission. Most towns do this. We really have no need for two separate commissions. In Brookfield, there's very little for the Planning Commission to do, as there's almost zero subdividable land. It's easier for all parties and much less work for everyone that's involved. Newtown does it this way, and many other towns do. I would advocate the same concept for the Conservation Commission and the Inland Wetlands Commission. All of these would be under the Land Use Office. As you may or may not know, land use has a tremendous amount of work. The less meetings that the folks have to attend, better off everyone would be, including the taxpayers and the developers and the various members of the commissions. That's one recommendation. Another one would be that I would like to see us decouple the budget votes. In this town, we have two budgets, yet we have one vote. Both budgets must pass. If it gets voted down, then both budgets fail, and there's no reason for that. Other towns do not do it that way. For example, New Milford has, you can vote to affirm the municipal budget. You can also vote to affirm the school budget. They, of course, have the questions too high or too low. This would give we also have, of course, two separate commissions that handle this. We have a Board of Finance and we have a Board of Education, so they work separately. So should we not have a vote on each? Additionally, I think all boards and commissions should follow the same process for filling vacancies. Normally, with most boards and commissions, the various political parties, two primary political parties, nominate members to fill the vacancies for their particular party. As you know, in this town, we have minority representation, so there's a guaranteed representation from the minority party. The Board of Selectmen then vote on sending those recommendations to the committees. The committee should not be filling their own vacancies. It seems to me that that's a violation of due process, and there's no independent review there. The political parties and the folks are shut out of the process. So it would be nice if we followed a consistent approach. Simply the approach that we follow for the vast majority of the committees is to have the political parties submit their vetted candidates for their particular positions. This does not eliminate any, there's no political advantage to be gained there since we do have minority representation. I'd also ask that the charter revision consider some sort of effort with respect to rules of conduct and removal for ethical or conduct standards that are violated. They should be strengthened for the selectmen and all the commissions and the boards. Having worked for many years for the federal government and also having been involved with state government to some extent, all of these municipal organizations, federal organizations, government organizations have some sort of hostile workplace training, ethical standard training. There's a process for removing people who, for whatever reason, can't get along with one another, can't behave in a professional manner. I think it's also important that any discipline letters or any complaints that are against individuals where they've been cautioned, especially if they're elected officials, those should be made public. Public has a right to know if we have bad actors here. Their votes, they should have that information before they vote. It shouldn't come out after they vote on something. And I think that is it. Thank you for your time.
Andrew, thank you very much. Somebody else want to? Ma'am?
Okay, so my name's Kathy Van Duzy. I live at 198 Wiskineer Road. And Mr. Rhinestone talking behind me. No, I'm speaking right now. Okay?
Mrs. Van Duzy, please share with us.
Thank you. So I'm really a little bit disappointed of how this is rolling out, so I have a few things, but I'm going to say one thing. I read the charter considerations write-up, and I think that you're out on the right track, wanting to make changes, but I do have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things I have a problem with, but I'm going to go with the one I don't have a problem with that I'd like to comment on, okay? So the first thing is down at the second page about the purchasing. Can you recommend changes to the purchasing section of the charter? You should erase the entire thing. I have a lot of purchasing background, 20 years. Part of that was in a municipality, local. And we should definitely change that. I'll tell you, just in case. That's C8-7. So if you take a look around it, like Bethel's, even Reading, if they're small, Newtown, you can get a good guideline of good purchasing procedure documentation for that area. Because purchasing is in charge of our tax dollars, actually. So there should be a really good procedure in this so that everybody knows how it goes. You can't tell right now from reading that. And so I hope, and so also, if you did ever want to ask me a question about municipal purchasing, I'd be happy to give you my experience at any time. So, and I'm going to be really brief because, and I don't want anybody to think I'm being hostile, I'm just being honest, and I think that's what you want. And there's a few things on here that I could guarantee you, if the voters in Brookfield, I don't care what party they're in, if they see this, and they will vote no immediately. They won't care what else is in it, they'll just vote no. So I'm going to point those out to you. And before I do that, though, I hope that in the future, all this information is readily available for the taxpayers. Like, you see how many people really know about this, because I know a lot of people care about it. So it's not the apathy you see, it's that they don't even know how to, where do you find, I had to dig. You won't believe how long it took me to get the information. So instead of learning everything in the news times, we'd rather hear it from the town. So when you're done with all your good work, if it would be okay, I think you should put it in the library for people to read, accessible around here, and first and foremost on all your web pages and social media that you do, to put links to the charter and to your proposed charter, period. And what the date, and give them a chance somewhere where they can write in, email in their comments, because I don't know many people that can be available at these hours. So, and full disclosures, I was a member of the Youth Commission for 10 years. So I'm real familiar with everything. So I hope that you take that to heart. I'm not just a crank. So I'll just name them. I mean, unless there's an overwhelming, documented for the taxpayers and voters reason for these things, because what do I know? It's on the list, and it wouldn't be me if I didn't point it out. So I might leave one out. I don't know yet. So the first one is changing the town clerk from elected to appointment. No good. I'm taking out the merging the planning but that was a great explanation. So now I know this gentleman before me explained his reason for merging those two commissions, but the voters want to know why. They're going to want to know why for every line item that you change. So you need to do that if you want to pass it. So I'll reiterate. Automatic no, changing town clerk from elected to appointed. It will not fly. 5 times in our history this has been tried, and every time it was in there, it failed. So take history for what it's worth. Many voters still live here. Term limits on all boards and commissions, regardless of whether they're elected or appointed, and that no members serve for more than 2 terms. You're going to end up shutting down everything if you think there's enough people to keep on going on these commissions. And a lot of them are cumulative. So you're going to have people changing all the time, nothing's getting done. No good. People don't expect that from Brookfield. For no chairman of any board or commission to serve at the term in that role for more than 1 term, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's the commission, the voting members of each commission's job to elect their chairman. And if it's a commission that needs to have that chairman stay there, that's absurd. 1 term. Automatic no vote. I don't even know why the municipal building committee should be among those where it's an elected committee with term limits, but I guess you'll tell me. But the one that will really, as a dedicated commission member for 10 years, this is the biggest insult on this paper, and this is my last item. It's the one that says the list of boards and commissions should be reviewed each year by someone appointed by the first selectman to eliminate any board, commission, or ad hoc committee that is no longer relevant or active. The inactive groups should not appear on any calendar listing of town boards unless it's shown that they have a valid and relevant reason for their existence. They should be removed. Well, show me one that fits this. I would say, based on my 10 years experience on a commission, what would be better serving the town instead of this would be to get rid of the dead wood on the commissions who never show up. So I don't want to leave you thinking that I'm a crank. I'm not. I'm a productive member of the community. Thank you so much for your work, though, really.
Mrs. Van Duzy, thank you for sharing your thoughts. Do I see a hand?
Ron Jaffe, 21 White Pine Drive. Some of what I'm going to say was included in the letter I sent to you, but since this is a public hearing and I'm assuming that the video will be available to town, I think it's important for perspectives to be heard. I am disappointed that you did not start the proceeding by actually showing what the recommendations or the requests were and where the requests came from. So I think it's important for people to understand this. The Board of Selectmen had 6 items that they voted to send to you. Those were creating an actual pension board, changing vacancies so that a vacancy can be filled by a political party, rather than allow for a board change, changing town clerk from elected to appointed, merging and planning zoning commission into one commission, look at the budget process to see if it can be streamlined, and create an alternate position for the Board of Assessment Appeals. That was the list that the selectmen discussed and sent to you. The next set of things that was sent for you to consider were ideas by the first selectman, not discussed by the selectmen, and they should be looked at in a different light. But I think it's important for the town to understand this. I have just one comment to say about the comment that was made earlier about the process for replacing members of boards or getting on boards to begin with. And while we like to think that political parties in this town have huge power, the fact of the matter is that there is absolutely nothing in the charter or state statute that provides for political parties to have to suggest anyone. I'm not saying they shouldn't, but the fact of the matter is that anybody on their own can approach a board or the selectmen and say, I want to be appointed. The fact is that an unaffiliated person who really doesn't want to get affiliated with a party in any regard should have the opportunity to get involved. And so the idea, so just so we understand the dynamics of it, political parties certainly like to say, well, this is the slate that you should consider, and they do some vetting, but anybody who's a citizen can be involved in anything, and we need to honor that. As I wrote you, many of my concerns about a lot of what was recommended, in my mind, kind of have a political drive rather than a business drive or what's good for the town. The idea of forcing a political party to be, and this is, by the way, a change, would be a change in the charter and a change in the interpretation, forcing a board to replace somebody in the same political party as opposed to the best person available, so long as majority or minority representation as defined by our charter is retained. Why wouldn't we want the best, most dynamic, most involved person involved? And so that's the kind where I can understand the politics of it, but I can't understand as a citizen why that's good for the town. Same for turning town clerk into an appointed position. Discussion about the budget process and trying to streamline it. Having worked, with Mr. Gianazza for a while on the Board of Ed. I think I was on the Board of Ed for 7 years. I was also on the Board of Finance for 4 years. I've certainly been involved in the ins and outs of budget on a large-scale basis. And what the charter defines as the budget process may seem cumbersome to outsiders, but it is designed for the kind of government we have, and I'll digress a little bit here. We have a different form of government in Brookfield than most of the country. Town meeting form of government is so rare in the United States that it is literally not covered in any textbook available to anybody in the elementary or junior or high school, okay? So we need to understand that we have a town meeting form of government. It may be a relic, but it's a good relic. And the town meeting form of government means that you don't just have politicians or appointed officials or elected officials who are making decisions and who cares. You have to convince the town on virtually every step that it's a good idea. The budget, major purchases, construction projects that are huge, directions for the town. These are discussions that we need to have with the town. And so while a business associate may come in or a business consultant may come in and say, well, this is not how we do it at IBM, or this is not how we do it at a Fortune 500 company, that's not our form of government. Our form of government is really designed to do what we can to make sure that the people who live in town are involved, are informed, and make good decisions for everyone. It's not the easiest thing, but that's the reason we have a town meeting form of government. So while I understand in the abstract wanting to make things more streamlined, that's not our form of government. And so I urge us to understand that as we make our decisions going forward. I do want to talk a little bit about changes, and this is the third area of considerations, and this was our town treasurer's or our town financial person's ideas for the change. And many of my observations here are the same. What's good for the town may not be the most efficient thing from the financial person's perspective. I will talk about one very specific correction. She was talking about a technical correction. Our books and accounts are not audited, our financial statements are. But then the language that she goes on to suggest, Board of Finance shall provide for an annual audit of the town's financial statements in accordance with state and federal requirements. If you accept that, I would also ask that you add language to say that the audit will look into other issues as directed by the Board of Finance. We have done that. I did that when I was on the Board of Finance. And you don't want to take that ability away if you're going to be that micromanaging the language here. The last thing I'll say is, the idea of, I'll go back to the idea of, limiting terms on the boards. I agree that the idea of limiting is it's not well thought out in terms of what the outcome is for the town. One of the things that I found and continue to find, having worked with boards and commissions for many, many years, and I'm still involved. I'm on the Youth Commission right now. But one of the things that is hard to put a price on is what I'll call institutional memory. Okay? And, there is great damage to be done to the town if we do away with institutional memory. It is critically important for our town to survive and for our town to work as effectively and as well as possible. So I thank you for the time, and I look forward to the work that you do.
Thank you, Mr. Jaffe. Mr. Grimes.
Good evening, Charter Revision Commission members. Matt Grimes, 11 Orchard Street. I want to clear up a couple of things before I give my remarks. First of all, the suggestions that the Commission has are just suggestions from the Board of Selectmen. They can look into them, they can modify them, they can say, no, we don't think that's a good idea. Yes, they are, but they're just suggestions at this point. They have not gotten into any substantive work. Couple of things, some of them which you've heard me say at your meetings, others I'll just put on the record here. First, as far as the, and I'll correct a couple of things that have been said, the town clerk's position. First of all, it's been looked at 4 or 5 times. It's never gone in front of the voters, but I don't think that it should. I think we need to think institutionally about it, because every municipality in the state needs to have a clerk. It needs to be as independent as it possibly can from the elected legislative body and the executive body, and the only way that can really happen is for it to be elected by the voters themselves. I think if you look back at the history of it, you'll probably see that we've had very few contested town clerk selections. But the fact is that she or he, we've never had a male town clerk in this town, but maybe someday, they have to go before the voters. They report to the Secretary of the State. They don't report to your Board of Selectmen. They don't report to your First Selectman. They report to the Secretary of the State. So I think that the system is not broken. Certainly that does not need to be fixed. Now, the town meeting form of government that Mr. Jaffe spoke about, it is indigenous to New England. You know, I swear by the town meeting form of government, and I think most people do, because the big decisions remain with the people. So let's talk about the town meeting government and the institutions that we need to have. We have a chief executive officer, which is the first selectman. We say that the Board of Selectmen is the legislative body, but really when you get down to it, it's really the extension of the legislative body, because the full legislative body is all of the voters in the town. So they're as I said, the big decisions, budget, capital, are left to them. What I would suggest you do, though, one of the things that most towns have done in this area, New Milford has done it, Bethel has done it, several others have done it. I think the Board of Finance needs 7 members, not 6. It does not need a tiebreaker by the first selectman, because if we really want the 3 independent institutions, the chief executive, the independence, the extension of the legislative body, and the fiduciary, which is the Board of Finance, the tie-breaking onus has to come off the first selectman. Bethel does not have it, New Milford does not have it, Ridgefield does not have it. The towns that do not have charters have 6-member Board of Finances, but they don't have it. So that's one of the things that I need. If we truly want the independent fiduciary, that's very important. As far as New Milford is concerned, I need to clear up something about that. New Milford and Brookfield vote on the exact same 4 budget questions every year. I know that because I was procedural advisor to the Charter Revision Commission in New Milford, and we took the language out of Brookfield and we put it in the New Milford Town Charter. That's a fact. That happened. The only difference between Brookfield and New Milford is New Milford has evolved, as we need to look at doing, is that like Ridgefield has, like Bethel has, like Newtown has, like, what's the other one? Because the non-charter towns don't do it. I think Monroe, but if one of the budget passes, it stays. It does not go back out. That's what New Milford's difference is with the budget process. That's what Bethel's difference is. That's what Ridgefield's difference is. We're sending both budgets back out, even if one passes. It's time. We've evolved. We evolved to automatic referendum in 2007. We evolved to a split budget in the 2014 Charter Revision Commission with automatic advisory questions. And now it's time to say if one budget passes, whether it's the education budget or it's the town budget, that stays, and only the one that failed gets reduced. That's one of the things, institutional changes, that I think we need to look at. As far as planning and zoning is concerned, that has come up almost every charter revision too. The main reason I think that it has come up is not necessarily that we have a problem with the Planning Commission or the Zoning Commission. I think there's some idea that you may not be able to get all of the dedicated volunteers you would to staff 16 positions, 5 and 5 and 3 and 3 for so long. But look at it. New Milford looked at it the last time. They decided to stay separate as well. I'm not saying it's a good or a bad idea, but I do think it does need to be looked at. It's one of those things as the community evolves. One of the parts that I do think that is very important, though, is the like for like when it comes to elected officials. I do think that needs to happen. If it is to change, maybe it's either like or unaffiliated. I don't think it's a good idea to put a Democrat into a seat that a Republican was elected to, nor do I think it's a good idea to put a Republican in a seat that a Democrat is elected to. Sure, if Howard Lasser was elected to the Board of Finance and resigned, and the Board of Finance replaced him with me, yes, very similar knowledge of town government, very similar qualifications. Philosophies are totally far apart, and I swear if they elected him, they certainly wouldn't want me in that seat. And the opposite is true, I'm sure, as well. Another point that you really wanted to do with the institutions is have a look at the Code of Ordinances and see if we have any boards or commissions that have been in the Code of Ordinances a very short period of time. Get them in that appendix of the charter if they're not there now with the whole list of them. Sometimes when a board or commission is created by ordinance, it is often for the charter cycle, and it has to go there. And 2 more, again, institutional issues. We talk about in the charter about how we have a commission every 5 years. I think that's important, but one of the other things I think we ought to put in there too is it should be voted on in a state election year. not a municipal election year. It should not go up as an independent vote by itself, a standalone referendum. It should go up in a state election year. The charter is Brookfield's constitution. Check the election records. Every state election year brings at least twice as many voters out as a municipal election does. We should be voting on this only in state election years when it goes to the voters. It should not go up in a municipal election year. In fact, when it is in a municipal election year, it gets clouded with other municipal issues when people should be talking about the issues of the day. And the last one is that C411 of the charter. I think you need to talk to the town attorney about it. I think you need to get interpretation of it because the town is struggling with it now. It's struggled with it off and on for years as to if that second sentence where it says boards or commissions applies to the boards or commissions themselves or the individual members of the commissions. We all know that boards and commissions only have authority as a board or a commission. Individual members have no authority. Yes, the officers get some responsibility, but if that second sentence, this is the time to clarify it. If it is with a charter revision, it's now. So does that sentence again in C411 apply to individual board and commission members, or does it apply to the board and commission itself? I look forward to your work as it evolves, and I'll probably see you at your next meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Grimes.
You beat me to it last time. But now you let me point out the fact that the Board of Finance is not a fiduciary. They have no responsibility. Howard Lasser, 116 Tower Road.
Just about to remind you of that, Howard.
Yeah, no, actually, I'm glad to follow Ron and Matt because they reminded me that, I served on the Charter Revision Commission, I think it was 2007. Was it 2007? And one of the underlying principles that we all had in common was the town meeting form of government and support for that, and to encourage, the changes we made, I think, were to encourage greater participation on the part of the people. It was that year that we added the opportunity for the town meeting, for example, the annual town meeting, for people to make changes to the budget with limits and so on that are in the charter. And the intention was to encourage people to come to the annual town meeting. I mean, I remember, 35, 40 years ago, the annual town meeting, you'd have 50, 60, even 100 people there, and we'd actually debate the budget and line items in the budget. And that sort of passed away over time, and we tried to make changes that would encourage more debate, more discussion about it in a public hearing. So I would encourage you to keep that in mind as you consider the various things. I'll make a quick statement about the replacement on vacancies of boards and commissions, because it struck me as, we have had times when unaffiliated people are run for office and get elected. Sometimes they run as a petitioning candidate. Sometimes they run on a political party line. They're endorsed by a political party. So if that person were to resign, would you be required to replace them with an unaffiliated if they ran on a Democratic line, or would you be required to replace them with a D? I think it raises a lot of questions that I think don't really, the details don't really belong in a charter. As it's been said before, the charter is a framework. And I think that the way the charter is now, maybe it needs clarification. I'm a bit struck by the saying, what was sent to you, because the town attorney seemed to think that it was already settled law, even though it was inconsistent with 40 years. The town attorney's opinion was inconsistent with 40 years of precedent. But anyway, that's all I'll say about that. I just wanted to take the opportunity in this public forum to reiterate the things that I think I've already communicated to you either in person or by email. The one is borrowing. Right now, the charter requires us to go to referendum if we're borrowing over $1 million, which I think is fine. But I also think there should be some sort of threshold when it is a very large borrowing. I think it was 3 years ago we voted on the new school. It was over an $80 million bond issue. less than 25% of the people participated in that vote, so it passed with about 16% of the people because it was a special election. And I would suggest maybe some wording that's similar to what the charter, passing the charter is. If it's a special election, it has to overcome a certain threshold. So I would suggest really two thresholds. One is some kind of limit on, if it's over, I don't know what the number is, but I think I would put it as a percentage of the town's overall debt. Maybe if it exceeds an increase of more than 10% of debt, then there has to be a certain threshold that it has to pass, a certain amount of people have to participate in the vote in order for it to count. Something to that effect. The other thing I would remind you of, and I hope you will take this up, in the 2012, the charter revision included the opportunity for the people to go to a town meeting if the Board of Finance rejected a special appropriation. It is the only board in town where there is no appeal. The Board of Selectmen, there's an appeal. Anything the Board of Selectmen does can be appealed to a town meeting. Anything that land use commissions do can be appealed to the courts. But if the Board of Finance, under the current charter, or under the charter as existed before 2012, if the Board of Finance rejected a special appropriation, that was it. There was no appeal, even if the people in general wanted it. And so in 2012, we made a change to the charter. It was accepted. It was accepted by the voters, but the town attorney interpreted it a different way. So I would suggest clarifying that to make it clear that the townspeople can petition to a town meeting if the Board of Finance rejects a special appropriation. And finally, and I think it's most controversial, suggestion is allowing the selectmen and the Board of Ed to present the budget that they think they need to the people, rather than have it go through the multiple iterations that are currently in the budget cycle, where the Board of Finance eventually can unilaterally make changes even though they have no actual operating responsibility. I think it's a good idea for the Board of Finance to opine on the budgets and to suggest if things aren't aligned. For example, if the Department of Public Works says it costs $1 million to pave a mile of road and they say they need $5 million and they're only paving 2 miles of road, I would suggest that, that requires somebody to question it. If the Board of Ed is saying, it's an average of $50,000 for a teacher and the numbers just don't add up, it makes sense for the Board of Finance to question that and to put it back to the Board of Ed and say, something doesn't look right. People do make mistakes. I've seen them. So I think there's a process there, but ultimately it's the Board of Ed and it's the Board of Selectmen that have the responsibility to actually do what they say. The Board of Finance makes a recommendation to the town meeting, but the Board of Finance, has no authority to actually perform. And we have seen in the past where, in one case, the first selectman unilaterally cut a huge amount out of the Board of Ed budget, simply saying that I think his rationale was that the spending per pupil has risen exponentially, comparing it to 20 years ago, without any regard to other operational changes. So it's just, to me, it just makes sense. In the corporate world, we don't, we talk about market share, we talk about increasing productivity, we talk about those goals that we have and then the resources we need. The current process, takes that off the table because the Board of Finance has no operational responsibility. So I just suggest, I know it's unique, I know it's different, although I do notice that Newtown is, I think their charter revision recommendation, I don't know where it stands, you might know, but they were recommending eliminating the Board of Finance. I'm not suggesting we eliminate the Board of Finance, because there are differences. They have a town council, et cetera. But I think that there's an opportunity, one, streamline it, two, put the responsibility, put the accountability where the responsibility lies. So, anyway, thanks a lot.
Mr. Lasser, thank you. I see another hand.
Betsy McIlvain, 127 Long Meadow Hill Road. I also encouraging you not to change the vacancy section. All of our, particularly on the appointed boards, and that's my only experience, so I would limit it to that if you choose. But for long periods of time, when we had a vacancy on the library board or on the Commission on Aging, we looked for somebody, first off, who really wanted to do that. You can't just get somebody because they happen to match a political affiliation. So we always tried, we very often actually did go back to the town committees to say, we hadn't found anybody, do you have any good ideas about who we could nominate for this? But to say that it's an absolute, that you have to replace one with another, and then of course, unless we include a Brookfield party,
No
we
longer
would
exists.
no one would ever get into that position. But I think that we do have minority representation on all the boards and commissions. We do have people, at least the ones I'm involved with, who want to be there, who want to carry out the missions of those commissions. And they should be there, they should be encouraged. When I first started here, when we first moved to Brookfield, I wrote an email to the first selectman at the time, said I wanted to be on a board or commission. That was encouraged, so that citizens would say, I'd like to do that. I'd like to help the town. So you need to preserve that. I also am, I shouldn't tell you because I was chairman of the library board for 10 years. So that's not the best reason for saying you shouldn't have term limits, because there aren't that many people in town who really want to do this stuff. So term limits can be managed. I woke up one day and said, the last charter change, we wanted to make the library board a 9-person board rather than 6 regulars and 3 alternates. I'm very glad we did that by ordinance, not through the charter revision. But we said it was because it gave us a chance to develop leadership on the board. And so I woke up one day and said, wait a minute, you haven't resigned yet. You have leaders behind you. So we have a new chairman of the library board because Christina Cumberton has come up through working on the board, and she is going to be very good. And you never want to appoint or have an elected official for one term, because it takes most terms to learn the job. And so if you want somebody to stay, you've got to keep them there, or you've got to start over again. But it's very difficult to do that. So I hope you will not require, you can encourage, and obviously, yes, we have to keep to our the minority representation rules, which actually I think are little, they don't really allow for much minority representation, which is too bad, but that's a state problem. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. McElvain. I just want to make a quick announcement. The Board of Selectmen has this room at 7 o'clock, so we're going to have to vacate it at about between 10 and 5 minutes of 7. We will reconvene the meeting if people want to continue sharing ideas with us upstairs in room, I don't know what the room number is. Pardon me? 209. So, but I just wanted to let everybody know we got to keep it moving. So, do I see another hand go up? I see a hand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening. My name is Rochelle Hadza, and I work for the town of Brookfield. I am the Land Use Director. I find myself here unexpectedly, but when I heard that the Planning and Zoning, the possible merger of the Planning and Zoning Commission is on the agenda, I'd like to speak to that. I've only been here for 6 months, but I've had the pleasure of working with both commissions, both the Planning Commission and the Zoning Commission. And it was actually partly my recommendation to merge those two commissions. And I heard the question asked this evening, why? Why should we merge them? First of all, many towns, I would say probably most towns in the state, do have them merged. One of the reasons I think that these two commissions can be merged here in Brookfield is because the main job that the Planning Commission does is subdivisions. In order to make a subdivision, it requires, the law says that you have to divide something into more than 2 pieces of land. So there is no such thing as a subdivision with less than 2 new lots being created, less than 3 new lots being created. The majority of these large tracts of land that once existed in Brookfield no longer exist. So there are very few parcels of land that might be able to be subdivided. In my experience, just in the short 6 months that I've had, the Planning Commission meets twice a month, and they very rarely have anything of substance on their agendas. And that's simply because there is no business. There's no land to subdivide. So there was a time when the commission was extraordinarily busy. They were staying till 11, 12 o'clock at night. There's no doubt, and they put in a tremendous amount of work, and I certainly applaud John Van Hise, the chairman of that commission, for his very long years of service, and he really runs a very good commission. But I think that the time has come that because the commission has so little business, it need not meet. And that's the reason I recommend that the Planning and Zoning Commission are merged. They are closely related, of course, as you know. The statutes allow the merger. The Plan of Conservation and Development, which is presently under the auspices of the Planning Commission, is closely related to the zoning regulations. All the zoning regulations are supposed to reflect the wishes or the stipulations in the Plan of Conservation and Development. So it would be my recommendation, I very strongly recommend the merger, not because we can't find members. In fact, we have plenty of members on both of those commissions right now. It would be hard to decide who stays and who goes, frankly. I think that would be a bigger problem. And they're very, very conscientious people. And finally, I mean, it would certainly save the town money. Having to have 2 extra meetings per month requires a recording secretary to come out and take the minutes and prepare the minutes, file the minutes, and all that. So that would be my recommendation, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Do we have time for one more, or do you want us to? Okay, we got time for one more. Well, look. Oh, Rich. Come on up, Rich.
Rich Saluga, 32 Great Heron Lane. I just wanted to add my voice to the earlier speakers regarding the town clerk position. This is one of the most nonpartisan group of people that we have in town, and at least in my experience in the last dozen years that I've dealt with them. I've never seen or heard them dealing with things in a political way. And I really don't like when people take away the right of the community to have a voice in who gets chosen for different positions. The one thing, if it was possible to do, I would suggest that we figure out a way of voting for the town clerk for the candidates without any political designation. Because the problem is, people could be doing a good job, and we had, I think Ron was talking earlier about having the best people. You could have people doing a great job, but because they're in a particular political party and that political party doesn't engender support among the community in any particular year, that person could be out of a job just because they're on that line. And unfortunately, a lot of Brookfielders vote on the line and don't take the time to look at the individual people. So if we could figure that out, I think it would be a great idea, because I talk with Joan Locke and I talk with Andrew DeStefan now, and each time there's an election, they worry about losing their job because of the vagaries of political movement in this town. And it shouldn't be that way. We should be voting for the best people, and both of them have been excellent town clerks. And I've supported them in each election that they've had. And I just hope that we keep it that way. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Saluga. You're gonna go upstairs. Do we have anyone else from the audience that would like to speak at this time? No? Okay, Mr. Grimes.
Just wanted to answer two things, so, response. So as of 2018, there were 20 municipalities left in the state with separate planning and zoning commissions, for what that's worth. I don't know how many have merged them since then, but ironically, most of them are around here: Brookfield, New Milford, Danbury, New Fairfield. Those are 4 with combined. And as far as Newtown is concerned, so Newtown, their Board of Finance does not serve the functional equivalent of the Board of Finance. They're not a pure town meeting government like the rest of the towns around Danbury are. They're a limited town meeting government. Their legislative council serves as the functional equivalent of their Board of Finance. Their legislative council, ironically, 50 years ago, was called the Board of Finance. They changed it to the Legislative Council. They still have 3 selectmen. Then about 10, 12 years ago, they created what they called the Board of Finance, not under the statutes that govern boards of finances, but more as a planning board. So that's what they're thinking about eliminating. But Newtown's Legislative Council today serves the functional equivalent of the Board of Finance in the other towns.
Thank you very much. If there's no one else that wants to speak, I'm going to thank everyone for taking the time to come out and listen and to share your thoughts and hear what your other neighbors had to say. Thank you very much. Are we ready to adjourn?